Have you ever caught yourself asking or saying, I know why I'm doing this, but yet, why can't I stop? You see, many of us are aware that we are procrastinating, that we have difficulty saying no, that we are people pleasers, that we are overachievers, that we are perfectionists. Yet, why is it that you can't stop? Why is it that you can't transform? And many times people think that if I just read that next self-help book, went to that next coaching program, that next therapist is going to set me free. And the reality is, more and more you become aware, that is not actually equal to a bigger transformation. Awareness is great. You need awareness. That is the beginning of your journey, but that is not where the transformation occurs. So, what is the missing link in all this? You see, the missing link is actually in your subconscious. So, if you're just focused on your conscious mind and focused on willpower to change your life, chances are, yeah, you might have or experience a little short-term improvement in your life, and then you might end up sabotaging yourself again, because your subconscious programs are what silently runs your life, not your willpower. So how do we shift our subconscious program, and where did this programming come from? Let's dive into that. Welcome to the You Are Enough podcast. I'm Michelle Jacob. I'm an emotional wellness expert. I'm the author of the book You Are Enough and the creator of Quantum Inner Transformation Technique. Let's talk about some science here. Okay, where did these patterns start? Number one thing to understand is that our brain learns through experience. So whatever patterns we are doing right now, it actually started not in your adult years, but in your childhood years. And it was started as a way of protecting you, as a way of survival. Our brain, evolution, the way evolution worked is that our brain only focuses on keeping us alive. So if you had a parent who constantly rejected you or criticized you, or if you had a parent who abandoned you and whose love you were always seeking, your brain tried to protect you, try to earn the love of your parent. And you probably did that by being that good child. You probably did that by people pleasing, by trying to overly achieve so you can win the approval of that parent. One other thing to note is sometimes if your childhood was where you grew up in a home that wasn't safe, where there was yelling and shouting around you, parents were fighting all the time, or maybe you were the one who had to protect your mom or your dad from the abuse that was caused from one parent to the other, and you were the one having to take on this role of making sure your mom didn't overreact or your dad didn't overreact. Think of what that little child or the little you learned about you. Think of what the brain learned. The brain learned, in order to survive, in order to be accepted, in order to keep the peace in this home, in order to have my parents love me, I need to behave a certain way. Now, as a child, this may have served you, maybe being quiet, being not looking at your parents, or just doing what they said, even though you knew it was wrong. You didn't feel it resonating with your heart, yet you did it. All that ensured your survival, because as children, you need your parents to take care of you, right? You are alone. You can't go out there in the world and fend for yourself. So what does the brain do? Okay, what is the best coping mechanism at this time to ensure my parents are going to take care of me, to ensure I will be staying alive? Now, what happens to that is, over time, as you grow into adults, what ends up happening? Now, as an adult, you have repeated this thinking pattern, this survival pattern for years, over again. And now you're probably 30, 40, 50. This has ingrained into your brain. Now, another thing to understand, the science is every action, every behavior is a neural pathway. And the more you practice a certain behavior, the more neural networks and neural connections you have. So when you are trying to learn a new pattern, guess what we have to do? It's literally a new neural pathway that needs to be created. And the more you practice, the much stronger this neural network gets. And the more you don't use the old patterns, the old neural network, the body has an ability to take things away. Things that we don't use, we lose. What you don't use, you lose in every part of your body. That's why when you don't use certain muscles, you lose those muscles. That's why women, after giving birth and you have all that skin, it automatically starts shrinking, right? That's how the body works. Same thing happens in your brain. If you're not using a set of neural pathways, you will lose those pathways. So what do you need to do? There are multiple things you need to do. One thing you need to work on is repeating the new patterns. And you're probably trying to do that, but it's not quite effective. And this is why. Because you need to work on something else. You see, deep down, as you were learning these survival patterns, there were also stories that were being formed. Subconscious has been programmed. By the age of 7, it was programmed by your father, your mother, your teachers, the society you lived in, or whoever that closest caregiver was for you. Now what has happened? Now, or after the age of 7, you started to say these things to yourself. So if someone told you, oh, you are now very beautiful, okay? And you accepted that. After the age of 7, you look at the mirror, you're saying that to yourself. Oh, I'm not so beautiful. I don't love my nose. I don't love my eyes. Whatever it is. Oh, I don't love the color of my skin. Or maybe I'm not smart. Whatever it is that they told you, you're saying it to yourself, not even realizing, not having questioned, where is this programming coming from? Now, what's happening? Over time, this is becoming your subconscious program. See, we're like computers. We all carry a programming. And we're just operating systems. We're a body's operating system. Our brain is the operating system. It's just operating with a bunch of programs. But if we don't question these programs, if we don't bring these programs that are in our subconscious mind into conscious awareness, you will live your entire life. Carl Jung had a beautiful quote. If you're not aware of what's in your conscious, the subconscious will play these programs. I'm just paraphrasing this quote, and you will call it fate. And many of you are probably living that life where you think this is your fate. I'm just an unlucky person. Whatever it is that you have believed, the lies you believed about yourself, I'm here to ask you and to guide you to question that. Where did that thinking come from? Is that your mother's thinking, your father's thinking? Another thing to understand when it comes to why are you repeating patterns is that when we experienced a childhood wound, the brain, what happens in our brain is our amygdala, hippocampus. Amygdala looks at emotional patterns. So to the amygdala, it realized, oh, this particular memory isn't safe, and we need to remember this memory. So here's this memory, goes into hippocampus, and it stays there for you to remember. Now, what is happening is anytime you have experiences in your life as adults that are very similar to these memories or these experiences you had as a child, your teenage life, your young adult life, very similar to those experiences, it triggers the amygdala. It makes the amygdala think you're not safe, and you go into your old patterns, your old programming. You forget that the person standing in front of you, your boss, partner, you think it's your mother or your father. So sometimes if you had been afraid to speak up to your mom or your dad because there's a lot of fear in your body as a child, you're repeating that pattern. It's just different people you're playing that relationship with, right? So oftentimes you'll find that if you're not fully healed, you might end up finding a partner with whom you can play a past relationship. And I mean a past relationship, a relationship you may have had with your mother or your father, because that wound isn't healed, and relationships are a great opportunity for healing. And that I'll talk more about it in another podcast, another episode. Let me know if this is something you want to hear more of, and we'll talk more about childhood patterns and relationship patterns. To understand is we also have a nervous system, right? So you saw what was happening in your subconscious mind. You started to have these programmings that if I react this way, if I do this and this and this, I'll be safe. And as a result, there are also stories that formed, programming that formed. Somewhere deep down, you feel life is not a safe place. You feel life is all about survival. You may think the people around you are not trustworthy. You may think you're not enough. You may think love is something you need to earn. You may have faulty programming around your worth. You may have faulty programming around money. You may have faulty programming about everything. And not realizing it's a programming, you think that's the reality of what life looks like. And you live your life with that program. Now, another thing you need to understand is what's happening in your nervous system. Now, not only is there your brain and your neural pathways that gets repeated, but also there's something else that happens in your body. And that is the reason many people who haven't really healed from their childhood wounds, who haven't really forgiven on a subconscious level, and I am talking about subconscious because I have had many clients who come to me and they say to me, yeah, I have forgiven my parents, I've forgiven my ex. But when you go into a subconscious, you can see what the real state is. They're not ready to forgive yet. Yes, they consciously talk their way into quote unquote forgiving this person, but they haven't really released the grip and the pain and transform the pain that person caused in their life, right? Oftentimes, that is why you're not able to fully forgive someone. Again, we'll talk more in another episode about this as well. But let's come back to what's happening in your body. Now, every time you felt unsafe in your childhood, your teenage years, your young adult, your nervous system was in either fight, flight, freeze, or a fawn state. Now, in a fight state, you have something called the autonomic nervous system. That is basically everything that automatically happens in your body is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, and it has two parts. Okay, I'll quickly go over it: parasympathetic, sympathetic. Now, sympathetic is what leads to the fight and flight and the freeze and fawn responses, and parasympathetic is what brings us into balance, where it's restoration, it's where growth happens, where digestion happens, sleep happens, all of those wonderful stuff. So if you are struggling with lack of with your stomach, when there are stomach issues, if you're struggling with healing your body when you're often getting sick, or you are sick with an autoimmune condition, then chances are there's an imbalance in your nervous system. And this imbalance may not have just occurred recently. This imbalance is coming from that childhood once again, because remember, by the age of 7, you have been programmed. If you have been programmed to see everything as a threat, what ends up happening is your sympathetic tone becomes way higher than the parasympathetic tone. Ideally, the tones need to be maintained. That is a regulated nervous system. It's a balance. Now, if you had an upbringing where you weren't in a safe home, or you didn't feel safe around your parents, you didn't feel safe at school, you were bullied, what has happened is your sympathetic tone is much higher than your parasympathetic. And that sympathetic, when your nervous system goes into the sympathetic mode, is when you either get into fight responses, where maybe if someone tried to bully you, you were fighting, or you were just an angry person overall, that's a fight response. Or there's a flight response where you are scared, you're running away, you're hiding. Or there's a freeze response where you're just stunned, you don't know what to do. Think about deers if you watched how when a deer is attacked, or a loud noise is played near the deer, it just freezes, it doesn't know what to do. That's the freeze response. And then there's the fawn response. And fawn response is something I see a lot in my clients as well. The fawn response is you just people please. People pleasers, that's your fawn. That's how you stayed safe. Now, what ends up happening, another thing ends up happening, your cortisol levels in your body increases. Okay, higher cortisol is actually wear and tear in your body. This high levels of cortisol is also the reason why many of you are actually addicted to your emotional states, are addicted to your old stories. I know nobody talks about this as an addiction, but if you have an anger issue, if you have an issue of always being sad, there is an hormone that's involved here. And if you're used to those high levels of certain hormones, reducing that level, it's actually painful, right? It's not normal for your cells. So there is an addiction that happens as well with high levels of cortisol. So now let's say you're high functioning. High functioning often has high levels of cortisol in your body. And with many of my high functioning clients, it takes a sickness, autoimmune condition, something that shuts them, that makes them slow down. So before you get into that state, right, you do want to see what's happening in your nervous system. So high functioning, if you're always going, you don't know how to say no, you're burnt out, chances are your cortisol level is high. Now, this high level of cortisol is causing wear and tear in your nervous system. Each of your cell is being bathed with these high levels of cortisol. And remember the addiction? Now, this is what it looks like. Now, let's say you are trying to shift your behaviors and you are trying to go to the spa, or you're trying to just slow down and read a book. You find that you're unable to stop the thoughts in your mind. You find that you are unable to slow down. It feels uncomfortable slowing down. And that's because when you slow down, what's happening? Your cortisol levels decrease and DHEA hormone increases. By the way, DHEA is an anti-aging hormone. So the more you do this kind of work, the more you are actually releasing hormones that make you look younger, like DHEA. So there's an added benefit to this work. So now what tends to happen? When this cortisol is dropping, that's the uneasiness you're feeling, and you're not sure what's happening. This is what happens in addictions too. There's a drop in the hormone that's involved, and you are not sure what's happening. There's so much discomfort, and then all of a sudden, you go back to your old self. Maybe your brain starts overthinking, or even when it comes to healing, you start to do healing rather than being healed, and healing becomes a set of things you need to do. And that is one of the biggest mistakes I've seen in my overachievers. They try to do healing rather than allowing themselves to heal. Now, if that is you, what can you do about all of these? Now, there are things we can do. Number one thing you need to do is we gotta shift that subconscious program. We gotta shift the stories that are quietly running the show. And these aren't stories that you're aware of in your conscious level. Maybe you have awareness of, okay, this is what happened. And often if this happens, the coping mechanism is an overachiever, or a coping mechanism is a perfectionist. You have that awareness, let's say. But how do you shift? How do you change your programs? And that's where the quantum inner transformation technique comes in. And the reason I'm so passionate about this work, I'm so passionate about sharing with you why you've done all this work and yet you're feeling stuck, and why I know you're feeling stuck, is because I was you. You see, back in 2013, when I held my newborn son in my arms, I was this person who carried a lot of guilt and shame. I was this person who was in a toxic marriage. I was this person who didn't know how to stand up for myself. I thought standing up for myself was screaming back at someone who was screaming at me. I didn't know what boundaries looked like. I didn't know how to use my voice to say what I need. I didn't know how to say no, basically. And deep down, I thought love was something I had to work for because I wasn't lovable enough and I had to earn my love. And I, at the time, was an occupational therapist, and I graduated from the top universities. My undergrad, I graduated with distinction. My master's was from another top universities here in Canada. And yet I sat in team meetings feeling like an imposter, thinking I didn't belong there. And it was only after I had this download. So my first book, You Are Enough, was a divine download. I was actually creating a journal for my clients when all of a sudden I had this download of information. I started typing away, and it was this book that came as a divine download, and I knew this book was bigger than me. And that's when I got pulled into this mission. And I remember when I was writing the last chapter of the book, I had another download, and it said 20 million lives impacted and healed. And I get so scared. I got so scared. I thought God had chosen the wrong person for this job, because I used to believe I camouflage with my surroundings. How can someone who camouflages with her surroundings be someone who needs to stand up and share this message? So the next day I sat in meditation, and that meditation changed my life, because in that meditation is where I met my inner child for the first time. You see, in that meditation, I saw this giant boulder. And behind this boulder, I saw a little girl, and she was trembling. And I wasn't sure what she was scared of. So I started to really focus on her. And all of a sudden, I could see what was happening. I saw she was afraid to come from out of her hiding place, because there was a giant beast, and it was waiting to devour her if she came out. And as I continued watching, I saw this divine being, and all I can describe right now is it was as though it was the energy of love, unconditional love and peace. And it reaches out to this little girl, takes her from behind her hiding place, and gives to her a sword. And it wasn't just any sword, it was a sword of light. And the little girl, trembling, takes the sword and says, "But I don't know how to fight." And God says, "Only you can defeat the beast. You're not alone. I'll be right by your side." And then the little girl, she takes that sword, and I saw her walk towards the beast. And for the first time, she looks up right at the beast. And that's when I realized I was not just watching this vision, I was in it. I was a little girl. I was holding that sword. I was looking at the beast. And you know what I saw? That beast was none other than years and years of fear I had held on to. The fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, and the deepest fear that ruled over them all, the fear I wasn't enough. And that day, I took that sword and I pierced light into the heart of the beast. And all of a sudden, it all transformed into light. And I just felt this peace come over me. It was as though I was enveloped with love. And that day, I experienced what true freedom looks like. But also led me on this journey into this rabbit hole of understanding who that little girl was, because that was the first time I had encountered the little child within me. And from that point on my journey is when I dove into this. I created the quantum inner transformation technique because I wanted to give these kind of shifts. I wanted to create quantum transformation for others, where they can go into their subconscious. The little child, just visiting her, was only the beginning of my journey. And there was so much that happened over the course of time. The reason I call it quantum inner transformation is you are literally quantum leaping into that self that embodies the healing, that embodies being worthy, that embodies being powerful, embodies being the love. And all of a sudden, when you are embodiment of this person, of this new self, of this, some call it identity work, but I do think this is deeper than identity work, because the moment you're changing your programming, the moment everything is shifting in that area, you're also shifting your nervous system. You're also starting to create new neural pathways. And this is not a work where you need 32 sessions. This is a work where literally you see the shifts in 6 sessions or less, right? It's powerful. But this is the missing link. Your subconscious program that's running your show silently is the missing link. You see, 5% of how your life turns out is basically what the conscious mind can control, your willpower. 95% of how your life turns out, that is controlled by the subconscious mind. So if there's one thing you can take away from today's podcast is I just want you to understand that there's nothing wrong with you. You have been trying so hard to change the patterns, to change your life. And everyone kept telling you, do this, do that, do this strategy, do that strategy. And you kept doing it. And yet you're so tired. You're seeing it affecting your life. Maybe it's affecting your relationship with your kids or relationship with a partner. Maybe you found that right partner. And yet something is blocking you from fully receiving the love. Know that there is hope. Know that once you shift your subconscious mind, powerful shifts happen. That story that's running this show silently is a reason you are stuck right now. Next time you see yourself repeating a pattern, maybe it is people pleasing, maybe it's overachieving, maybe it is you not trusting yourself, maybe it's you not able to receive love and pushing someone away, whatever that looks like, these patterns you want to break free from looks like, I want to invite you to ask yourself this question. I want to invite you to shift the way you think and step into curiosity and ask yourself, what is this pattern trying to protect me from? How did this pattern protect me in my childhood? What was it keeping me safe from? Maybe your procrastination is protecting you from failure. Maybe your people pleasing is protecting you from rejection. Maybe your overachievement is protecting you from the fear that you're not good enough. What are these patterns protecting you from? This is a start. You get to observe with compassion, with kindness, no longer criticizing yourself, because every time you judge yourself, your brain goes into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. And you're trying to shift that. Remember, you're trying to decrease your cortisol levels. You're trying to regulate your nervous system. You're trying to bring the sympathetic and parasympathetic into balance. Thank you so much for joining me in today's episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.